Hi, this is Chris Pells. In this video we're going to learn how to create event handlers for ASP.NET web pages and server controls. So let's get started by creating a sample website. Just create a regular ASP.NET website, and we're going to call this website VB, and this will be in the sample code that you can download with this video. So the first thing we're going to look at is page events in ASP.NET. Let's open up the code behind file for this default ASPX, and let me go down here into the page events drop down, and over here you can see these are all the standard page events that come with the ASP.NET framework in terms of an ASP.NET page lifecycle. And if you want to add an event handler for any of these here in Visual Basic, what you need to do is either select the event from the drop-down list. In this case we're going to create an event handler for the load event, or you could manually code it. So let's select the load event. And we're going to do a simple little experiment here to show you how this load event for the page is connected to the actual loading of the page. So let me create a public string variable here where we'll put a little message. And that will hold a message, and then what we're going to do is let me go back over to default ASPX to the HTML side of things, and let's put a little bit of script here, and we're going to say response.write, and we're going to write out the contents of that message variable. So now let's go back over here to our event handler for the page load event. And the first thing to point out is the naming convention for this method. As you can see, it's page underscore followed by the name of the event. So in this case this handles the load event for the page. And if we go back up to that list of page events, if we were to create a method for any of these other events, let's say pre-render, you'll see that we'll get a similar method, which is page underscore pre-render. So let's go inside this load event and let's assign some text to our message variable. We'll just put in the page load event handler. Now let's look at the syntax for this page load method, and let me get rid of the Solution Explorer so we have a little more real estate and we can see the entire syntax here at once. And I mentioned the underscore event name, and then we get these two standard parameters passed into any event, the object representing who sent the event, and then the variable containing the event arguments. In this case it's the standard system.event arguments object. And then over here on the right side in Visual Basic is the handles keyword, and that indicates what event this particular method is handling. And in this case this page underscore load method is handling the me.load, which is the page.load event. So let's fire up the web page here and we'll see that this page load event is fired. We'll put a breakpoint right here. So let's go ahead and start up the default ASPX web page with the debugger. You can see we're in here in the debugger assigning the value to our message, and then if we let it run from here we get the web page with our message displayed. So in this particular scenario we are explicitly declaring a handler for the load event to be this page underscore load method. And now let's go back over to the ASPX page and take a look at the page attribute up here at the top on line 1. And notice this attribute called auto event wireup equals false. This attribute refers to a capability in the .NET framework where the framework can automatically connect event or methods, I should say, as event handlers to specific events based upon a specific naming convention. And in the first case that we looked at here, we're explicitly declaring the handler for the page load event. Now, auto event wire up is false, so whenever auto event wire up is false, you have to explicitly declare the event handler for a particular event. Now if we change this to true, which I'll do right now, and we then go back over to our code behind, what we can do is we can actually get rid of this handles on the end of the method declaration, and now because this method follows the naming convention of page underscore load and auto event wire up is set to true, the framework will automatically associate the page underscore load event with the page load method. And now we'll fire up the web page again, and this time we'll see whether or not, without the explicit handler declared and the auto events wire up equal to true, that we get the event handled. And indeed, here we are back down in the page load method, even though we don't have an explicit handler attached, and we will get the same message in our web page. Now, as you might expect, if we go back over into the page and make auto event wire up equal to false, leave this method declaration without the handles on it, and fire up the web page again, this time we will not get the message displayed because our page underscore load method was never called. Now, there's one very important thing to understand about this automatic event wire up, and that is if you have this set to true, what's going to happen is that the framework is going to create and attach a delegate for every single one of the page events. Now, in this particular scenario so far, we've been dealing with an individual page and the auto event wire up attribute. What I want to show you next is let's take this auto event wire up attribute out of the page element, and we'll go back over here to the code behind, and let's get rid of the handles on the method again. So what we have here is we have auto event wire up not declared as an attribute in the ASPX page, and we are not explicitly indicating that we want this page load to handle the load event for the page. So what's going to happen in this situation is that because we don't have the auto event wire up attribute, it's going to refer back to the default value in machine.config, which is set to true. So we should get the message on the page because the auto event wire up in the machine.config being set to true is automatically going to attach to the page load method here in our code behind, just as if we had auto event wire up equal to true over here as an attribute in the ASPX file. So let's fire this up in the debug mode, and you'll see, as expected, we're hitting the page load method because the machine.config auto event wire up is set to true, and we get our message on the page. Now, so far we've been working in a Visual Basic sample website, and what I'd like to do next is to create a sample C# website, because this same scenario works a little bit differently in the C# language, and I think it's important that you see a comparison between the two depending upon which language you work in, or if you work in both. So let me open up the Solution Explorer and let's create another sample website. This time we're going to do one in C#. Let me just change the folder for the sample code, and we'll call it website C#. So let's go down and create our little response.write script for our message. Then let's go to our code behind, and you can see that we automatically have a page load method created by the project template. So if we go up and create a public string message variable, and then down here we'll assign a text that we'll say message equals in the page underscore load event handler. So let's make the C# website our startup project. Now let's start up this default page in the debugger, and let me put a breakpoint over here on line 17. We'll start it up in the debugger, and indeed we hit the page load method and we see the message on the page. So one thing that's different about this in C# is, if you notice, we have not written any code here to indicate that this page load method handles the page's load event. And that's because back here in default ASPX for C#, you can see that the auto event wire up attribute is set to true by default, which is different than